Hey, viewers! Today we are going to talk about the movie Wild Nights with Emily. Madeline Olnick wrote and directed the 2018 American romantic comedy film, Wild Nights with Emily. Emily Dickinson meets Susan Gilbert during an Amherst Shakespeare Society recitation when she is in her teens, and a romance grows during a scene in which they act as lovers. They kiss later while walking. Emily's family departs for a month-long trip, and Susan joins Emily for the duration. They continue to spend time together while keeping their romantic relationship from others. Susan accepts a teaching position out west, and they send numerous love letters to each other while she is away. When Emily returns, she is surprised to hear that Susan has been secretly betrothed to Emily's brother Austin. Susan apologizes to Emily and explains that it's all part of a larger plan. Susan couldn't financially support herself without getting married, and by marrying Austin, they can build a house directly next door to Emily while no one suspects their romance. 20 years later, Emily and Susan live next door to each other, and Susan's children exchange innumerable notes between the two homes. Emily shows Susan the poems she has written, some of which are scrawled on scraps of paper and in the margins of recipes, and many of which address Susan personally. Emily also enjoys gardening and baking bread for the neighborhood youngsters. During a time when Susan is too preoccupied to speak with Emily, a recently widowed Kate Scott Turner comes to stay with her. However, Kate becomes more interested in Emily and decides to stay at her apartment instead. Kate leaves abruptly, and Emily tells Susan she wishes she could have said goodbye and given Kate the garters she embroidered for her. Susan is envious since Emily never made garters for her. Emily is accompanied by Judge Otis Phillips Lords, an elderly man who mistakes the Bronte sisters, falls asleep mid-conversation, and labels Emily a plain. He stumbles on his way out, and just as Emily reaches out to rescue him, Susan enters, catching them in the middle of their embrace. Thomas Wentworth Higginson pays Emily a visit after she writes about releasing her poems. During their discussion, he corrects her on the definition of poetry, discusses how women's writing differs from men's writing, and even copy-edits one of her poems in front of her. He tells her that the poems are not ready for publication. Mabel Todd arrives at Emily's house on an offer to play the piano for her, but is surprised when the maid informs her that she will play alone in the drawing room. And Emily will remain upstairs to listen to the music while she writes. Mabel met Austin after moving to Amherst, and the two had an affair. They have little remorse about it and routinely appear in public together. They frequently visit Emily's residence to have sex, which she avoids by staying in her room. Mabel offers that they publish their love letters, but Austin finds the concept too scandalous and advises her to seek a creative outlet elsewhere. Emily suddenly grows ill and dies. Susan is asked by her sister Lavinia to wash the body in preparation for burial. After Emily's death, Mabel uncovers a trunk full of her poems and letters, but she notices that many of the best ones are dedicated to Susan. She asks Austin for aid in removing any instances of a Susan and replacing them with men's names. Years later, after Emily's work has been successful, Mabel addresses a big group of society women. She explains that Emily was such an eccentric recluse that she only saw her face once, in the casket at her funeral. She explains that her poems must have been intended for Judge Otis, and she gave names to all of them so that audiences could understand what they were about. Emily's niece also gives a lecture about her aunt and mother's secret romance, but only 3 people attend. The film concludes with titles that describe how contemporary technology has exposed Mabel's erasures and proven that the love letters were truly penned to Susan. Thank you.